Well, vote counting is continuing in different states across the United States, with the election results expected to come down to those 7 all-important swing states, and which candidate between Vice President Kamala Harris and her rival, former President Donald Trump, wins the Electoral College vote. So as we continue our special coverage of the US elections, the presidential elections, this morning we take a closer look at how these elections have influenced the global geopolitical and the country's domestic affairs as well. This morning, we are joined by a panel of guests. We've got with us Ambassador Ebrahim Rasool. He, of course, is the former South African ambassador to the United States. He joins us online. And Dr. Sithembile Mbete, who's a senior lecturer of the Department of Political Science, the University of Pretoria, will also in the next hour bring in our SABC News International editor, Sophie Mokoena, to weigh in on the conversation. But right now, let's just quickly give you a glimpse of where we're at, because I suppose talking about this is one thing, but let's show them to you. Here's a map that we've got. This is generated by Reuters. They are looking at those different results and what is in and how it's looking so far. So what we can say is that there are obviously the big number is 270 electoral votes, and those are how many are needed to win. And at the moment, we've got Kamala Harris with 91. So that accounts for 46.3% of the vote. Remember, this is still very, very early, but there's just been a big jump there with Donald Trump. While I've got this open here, it's jumped up to 207 of those electoral votes right now. So he's got 52.3% of the vote. So in vote numbers, it's 46.5 million so far to Donald Trump that have been counted, and then, of course, of the votes, it's 41.5 million to Kamala Harris. So let's take a look at one of the interesting ones as well, and that's Texas, because, look, Texas has always been one that has been for the Republicans. So there's no surprise there that the Republicans have again this year taken it. Let's put that map up on the screen so you can get an idea of what Texas is looking like at the moment. So what the results are saying there is that it has been called, and that is Republican. So Trump has got that one. That was a huge margin for him, because those counted for 40 of the results, and he got 56.3% of the votes, and Harris 42.5%. So that's what the results are looking like there in Texas. But I think the next one we wanted to look at was New York. And New York is one where, of course, we've got Kamala Harris. She has looked a little bit better there. I don't know if that's the New York result. You can probably see better than I can, because that's quite small for me. But in terms of those results, we can see that Kamala is leading, and that is one of those that is always a Democrat stronghold. So I think that's one is definitely going to go to the Democrats, as they are calling it now. All right, let's have a discussion on this now. And here we've got two. I mean, we can talk about those ones. I mean, when we talk about New York, we talk about Texas. Those are, I mean, no surprises whatsoever.
No surprises there, no. Yeah. And I think that, you know, those are pretty solid, you know, partisan states where we know who's going to win in either of them at any given point. But, you know, with the US election being centered around, and calling it being centered around the Electoral College votes, those swing states, those marginal states are really where you need to be looking. And so in this particular case, and the ones that we don't have yet, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, we see North Carolina has already been called, it looks like, for, or is close to being called for Donald Trump. And so, yeah, so those other ones, but the big gap at the moment between the seats or the Electoral College votes that have been called for Harris versus Trump, that 91 to 207, I think it was earlier. That's a huge...
It is a huge gap.
And remember that you need 270 Electoral College votes to get the election, so Trump only needs 60 more.
Yeah, and that's the reality. Yeah. And I know we've got the big the big contested swing states. Those are the ones that we're waiting very patiently on, because those are big, and a lot accounts to those ones. And a lot of those, they obviously haven't come in. But, I mean, as we're looking at bright and early in the morning and how things are looking there, I mean, the supporters of the Republicans and the Trump supporters must be exceptionally happy with things so far. Let me get an early view from you, Ebrahim. Let's talk to what we're seeing. And I mean, 207 to 91, we can't call anything, and people are saying this is going according to plan. Let's bring in Ebrahim Rasool now, a former ambassador who was based in the US in Washington, which I had the privilege of going and visiting you in your house at the time. It felt like a lifetime ago, because so much has changed in US politics since those days. So much has changed, and yet some things stay the same. Talk to us about what we're seeing right now. I mean, some looking at this and saying, sure, I mean, Trump's getting closer and closer to victory once again. But again, it's very early.
Well, thanks very much, and good morning to both of you. I want to say that normally in this election, you shouldn't get anxious, in the sense that both are expected easily to get to around 220, and where Trump is getting much of his figures are from your kind of rural, quick counting states and so forth. And so you expect both of them to get 220 electoral college votes, and then the final 50 is what the swing states bring in. So, for example, Georgia would be quite good, but Fulton County is still being counted, and that has the majority of votes, particularly African American. And so one can go through each one of these battleground states, these 7 battleground states, and see who will win the majority of 50 electoral college votes, so that can determine who gets to 270. So I think it's early days. Kamala Harris would wait for her big hitters to come in, like New York, like California, and there you're dealing as big as almost Texas, that has over 40, close to 60 electoral college votes. California is college votes rich. New York is college votes rich. And those latter two would probably go Democratic, like Texas went Republican, and then things look a lot more equal. And so it then comes down to your Pennsylvania with 19, your Michigan with 16, and so forth, and that determines who gets to 270 first. So it's fairly early days, because the very urbanized areas take a little bit longer to count.
Yeah, they really do. You know, a lot of people sit and listen to the US elections, and I mean, that's all I've been hearing is analysis and all of these things about how it works and why a state has got more electoral votes than another, and they try to balance this and that. For South Africans, it perhaps is not that simple to understand. Do you want to take a dig at it? I mean, let's start there. We've got a long broadcast ahead of us. Yes. So, I mean, I think it's important that we explain how the votes are given, these electoral votes, and how they are determined per state.
Okay, so the American system, so what we have here is that there is a vote. Certain parties get a certain proportion of the vote. The seats that you get is equal to the proportion of the vote that you get, and the biggest party's leader becomes the president. That's our system. The American system works very differently. There's 2 things about it that are really important. The first one is that it is the presidential vote. People vote, there'll be whatever the amount that a particular candidate gets. But the popular vote is not what determines the US election. What determines the US election is the Electoral College in each of the states in the United States. And the states within the United States have an Electoral College that is based on the population size and distribution, and the Electoral College of a particular state, for the most of the states, I think with the exception of 3 or 4, will vote for the candidate that got the most number of votes in that state. So in California, where the Democrats tend to get the most number of votes, all 54 of the Electoral College votes of California will tend to go to a Democrat. The opposite is true of Texas, where all of the Electoral College votes of Texas will tend to go to a Republican because the Republicans tend to win the most number of votes in Texas. Now, the big question around the swing states is that there's certain states where it is not clear, where it swings between the Democrats and the Republicans, or states where the support for one or the other party changes in any given year. So in 2016, Michigan, which had for 50 years been a Democrat stronghold state, swung to Donald Trump. And we had a reversal of that, a marginal reversal of that in 2020 for Biden, and it's not clear which way it's going to go in 2024. And so those states where they swing between the Republicans and the Democrats are then the ones that we watch out for, and particularly those states that are the swing states that have the bigger electoral college votes. So Pennsylvania, for example, with its 19 electoral college votes, is a state that we would be watching particularly, perhaps more so than Nevada, which has Electoral College, which is also a swing state, but has fewer of the Electoral College votes than, let's say, Pennsylvania.
I mean, the biggest ones, I mean, California's got 55 of those electoral votes. I mean, that's a massive one. Illinois at 20, Massachusetts 11, Michigan 16. So the very big ones, and I think Ebrahim was giving us a good understanding of just hold your horses before we get too excited about where these results are going, because the very, very big ones are still about to come. However, having said that, I imagine that there may have been some hope from the Democrats that at this point they may have stolen some of the votes from Trump, that, with a female black president in the running for the very first time, that there may have been a shift in voter sentiment. But I think when I first came to you, it says, I said to you that, the more things change, the more things stay the same. It looks like the same narrative once again during these elections, that voters are going and they're not doing anything differently.
No, I think that is correct, and the party lines are very drawn on almost every issue except in those 7 swing states.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, almost every election I've observed, the Democrats win a plurality of the popular vote, but it doesn't necessarily translate into, for example, a plurality of the Electoral College. As Dr. Mbete had explained, it's a winner takes all in every state. It's not proportional that gets carried forward. So that's the one thing. I think the problem for Kamala Harris would be the extent to which she is tied to the incumbency. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there is a great degree of dissatisfaction, even anger, against the incumbents. And so she may either represent a break from the Biden incumbency, or she may carry the burden of the Biden incumbency. And so that is going to be what could be the counter-narrative to the idea of black female for the first time, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really, she's on a very sticky wicket with regard to the issue of incumbency, the dissatisfaction people feel, the economic, the dissatisfaction with immigration, and the issues. And so she's also facing a small section, but very critical, in particularly Dearborn, Michigan, which Biden won by 150,000 votes. When Biden faced a primary election there in February, 100,000, mostly Arab Muslims, voted unsubscribed or uncommitted. 100,000 of them. And if that translates into either a protest vote for Jill Stein, or, as some Arab leaders had said, a vote for Trump, because they believe he will end the situation in Gaza quicker, then I think Kamala could be in trouble in a place like Michigan with its 16 electoral college votes. So there are a number of issues that are very much at stake, and that would complete the narrative about how Americans would vote.
All right. I'm going to pause it here. We're going to pick up and continue with this discussion, but we need to take a quick break here on the program, and we'll bring you the latest news coming out of those US elections. But I can tell you, just nothing has changed. 270 is that sweet number in terms of those electoral votes. Trump is on 207, and Kamala Harris at this point is at 91.